Oliver Cromwell, a leader, a revolutionary, a complex figure whose actions still spark fierce debate centuries later. How did a seemingly ordinary farmer from the English countryside rise to become the most powerful man in England, overthrow a king, and reshape the very fabric of the nation? This is the gripping and often challenging story of Oliver Cromwell, a man driven by faith, ambition, and a vision for a new England. Imagine a time in England in the early 17th century where life was deeply intertwined with religion and loyalty to the king. Born in 1599 in Huntingdon, a town in eastern England, Oliver Cromwell wasn't born into royalty or immense wealth. His family, the Cromwells, were gentry, respected landowners, but not part of the highest nobility. Young Oliver grew up in a time of great change and tension. He received a good education, even attending Sidney Sussex College in Cambridge for a short while, though he didn't finish his studies. He was a serious young man, known for his strong religious beliefs, which leaned towards Puritanism. Puritans were Protestants who felt the Church of England, even after separating from Rome, still had too many Catholic practices and wasn't pure enough. They wanted simpler worship and a life guided strictly by the Bible. For many years, Oliver lived a relatively quiet life as a farmer and landowner. He married Elizabeth Bourchier and had 9 children. He was, by all accounts, a devoted husband and father, managing his estates. He wasn't a natural politician or a soldier in his early years. Can you picture a man in his 40s, settled with his family, suddenly being called upon to lead a revolution? That's exactly what happened. The England of Cromwell's time was a powder keg of religious and political conflict. King Charles I believed he ruled by divine right, meaning God had chosen him and no one could question his authority. But Parliament, especially its Puritan members, believed the king was becoming too powerful and was neglecting their rights and the true Protestant faith. Charles I's actions, like trying to force a more traditional style of worship on the church and raising taxes without Parliament's consent, pushed the country to breaking point. By 1642, the disagreements exploded into the English Civil War, pitting the king's cavaliers against Parliament's roundheads. When the war broke out, Cromwell, at 43 years old, was initially just a captain in Parliament's army. But he was no ordinary soldier. He believed passionately in the cause, seeing it as God's fight for justice and true religion. He quickly realized that Parliament's army needed to be disciplined and religiously motivated to defeat the king's forces. He famously said, "I had rather have a plain, russet-coated captain that knows what he fights for and loves what he knows, than that which you call a gentleman and is nothing else." He began to train his soldiers, often called the Ironsides, disciplining in them fierce discipline, courage, and a deep sense of purpose. Imagine the dedication of these men, fighting not just for a cause, but for what they believed was God's will. Cromwell's military genius quickly became clear. He was a brilliant cavalry commander and strategist. His Ironsides rarely lost a battle. As the war progressed, he played a crucial role in shaping the new model army, a truly professional, well-trained, and highly effective fighting force. This army, with its strong Puritan core, became the backbone of Parliament's victory. Major battles like Marston, Moore, and Naseby were decisive wins for Parliament, thanks in large part to Cromwell's leadership. By 1646, King Charles I was defeated. But the victory brought new problems. What kind of government should England have? Charles I, despite his defeat, refused to compromise. Many in Parliament still wanted to keep the monarchy. But Cromwell and the more radical members of the army felt the king was a constant threat to peace and liberty. After much debate and a second, shorter civil war, a radical decision was made. King Charles I was put on trial for treason against the people of England. On January 30th, 1649, Charles I was executed outside the banqueting house in London. It was an unprecedented event in English history. A monarch, chosen by God, killed by his own subjects. Imagine the shockwaves this sent across Europe. After the king's execution, England was declared a Commonwealth, a republic without a king. Cromwell was now one of the most powerful men in the country. He then turned his attention to suppressing royalist rebellions, particularly in Ireland and Scotland. His campaigns in Ireland, in particular, were brutal. In 1649, his forces stormed the town of Drogheda, massacring thousands of royalist soldiers and Catholic civilians. This act remains a deeply controversial and painful part of Irish history, seen by many as a cruel atrocity. Imagine the conflict within him. A man of deep religious conviction, believing he was carrying out God's work, yet overseeing such violent acts. By 1653, Cromwell felt that Parliament was still too slow and ineffective. He dissolved it by force and, after a period of trying different forms of government, he was eventually appointed Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland. This essentially made him the head of state, though he famously refused the crown when it was offered to him. Perhaps out of a mix of genuine Puritan humility and a strategic understanding that taking the title of king would betray the very revolution he had fought for. As Lord Protector, he tried to establish a stable, God-fearing government. He promoted religious tolerance for many Protestant groups, though not Catholics or some radical sects, worked to reform the legal system, and improved the navy. He brought a strong sense of order and Puritan morality to England, even closing down theaters and banning some traditional holidays like Christmas, which he saw as pagan. Cromwell's rule was a complex mix of idealism and authoritarianism. He believed he was acting on God's behalf, yet he often resorted to military force to achieve his goals. He was a man of contradictions, a champion of liberty for Protestants, but a conqueror in Ireland. A man who resisted the title of king, yet ruled with immense power. Oliver Cromwell died on September 3, 1658, likely from malaria and kidney stones at the age of 59. His death left a power vacuum. His son, Richard Cromwell, briefly took over as Lord Protector, but he lacked his father's authority and military support. Within 2 years, the Commonwealth collapsed. In 1660, the monarchy was restored, with King Charles II, son of the executed king, returning to the throne. The new government was eager to erase the memory of Cromwell and the regicides, those who killed the king. In a shocking act of revenge, on January 30, 1661, the 12th anniversary of Charles I's execution, Cromwell's body was exhumed from Westminster Abbey, along with the bodies of other leading parliamentarians. It was put on trial posthumously, found guilty of treason, and then hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn. His head was displayed on a pole outside Westminster Hall for over 20 years. Oliver Cromwell remains one of the most fascinating and controversial figures in British history. To some, he was a ruthless dictator who overthrew a legitimate king and stained his hands with the blood of innocents, particularly in Ireland. To others, he was a visionary leader, a champion of parliament and religious freedom, who laid some of the groundwork for modern democratic ideas. His story reminds us how deeply faith, power, and personal conviction can intertwine to shape the destiny of nations, and how history itself is a complex tapestry woven with threads of heroism and cruelty.